Be prepared for a dire future that's coming for us, the average guy. I'm not an incel. I'm not talking about incels. I'm talking about just the average guy. Because what they're doing is they're doing a double whammy. They're trying to at first tie incels with terrorists and call them terrorists. But they're also, what this title doesn't tell you, is that they're also tying guys, the average guy who have legitimate gripes with their society, in with incels. So they're going to label those guys as incels and then incels as terrorists, and then start bringing legal consequences, legal ramifications to any guy who goes online and gripes about his situation, no matter how rightfully he should be allowed to. Sexual deprivation as a security threat. Oh my God. So they're admitting these guys have sexual deprivation and it's a security threat. Now, I'm going to bring you down to the most important, let's say, the most important paragraph, because this shows you exactly what I'm saying is true. Now, relevance for Asia, curry cells, and rice cells. Look down to this paragraph, everybody. This is the important paragraph that shows what I'm saying is true. Now, such narratives are already visible in online communities. A case in point in Singapore is the dissatisfaction of losing girls to white immigrants. Others take on a slightly different but equally misogynistic flavor, such as the sentiment of how military conscription sets men back in their career, whilst self-serving and career-minded women are giving a step ahead to advance in life. Do you see what I'm talking about now? These men are not incels. They are giving a completely legitimate gripe that they are suffering from a sexist treatment where they, just by dint of being born male, are shanghaied to serve in the military for what, 1, 2, 3 years, while the women just go to university and get ahead of them. This is a legitimate gripe, and it's these men in Singapore should be rioting in the streets over this. They have the complete right to do so. They're citizens like the women in their country. So these guys are being tied in with incels, even though they're not. And the incels are being tied in with terrorists. So you can see what's going on. These men will not be allowed to go online and say this is wrong. You know, this double standard, this sexist standard of us being conscripted while the women aren't, is wrong. They will be stopped from saying that. Men's voices are the voices that get silenced, not the women. That has always been the case. Now that we know what is what, and before we go further, I want to show you that this is really kind of worldwide, because one of the guys showed me this. Chennai in India, government buses, which allow free commute for women, are collecting, I expect R means rupees, 10 rupees as minimum fare from men. The minimum fare was 5 rupees earlier. Do you see what's going on here? Regular bus users allege the State Transport Corporation is illegally overcharging male passengers to cover the additional expenses incurred towards free bus travel for women. See, this isn't Singapore, this is India. This is worldwide. These men are being robbed. They're being charged double the rate to make up for the women getting a free bus ride. There's no reason to give women free bus rides. And this is a state transport corporation. So this is state run, and they're treating the men in their country as third-class citizens. Now, these men deserve to uprise against this. Matter of fact, I would encourage it. I encourage Indian men to start uprising against this kind of disgusting, illegal behavior. Their government is supposed to serve the people, which means men as well as the women are people. And obviously, they're treating like the men as non-people. And that does have everything to do with what we're talking about here. This is worldwide. This is as soon as third world countries become first world, as soon as technology rises to the level that the country becomes easy and safe, the women dump their men, and that's where the incels come from. And then the country decides to discard the men as well. They decide to strip the men of their rights. They work towards it with any excuse they can find. That's what's going on. Now we can start up here. We can say the Canadian teenager. We're talking about this, stabbed a female owner of an erotic massage parlor in Toronto. That's all you get of this. There's no details. There's no explaining why he did it. Identified by police as an incel. See, now you see a big problem. The young man didn't, as far as I know, according to this sentence here, he didn't say, I'm an incel. The police just identified him as one. So that doesn't mean anything. It's no different than the police identifying you as a terrorist, whether you are or not, and then throwing you behind jail. You see, he was accused of being motivated by a misogynistic ideology and later charged with terrorism. In Canada, Canada should be ashamed of itself. The most this young fellow should have been charged is attempted murder. That's the most. He's not a terrorist. There's nothing in here that suggests why he did it. He was the first incel to be prosecuted as a terrorist. Since 2009, incels have committed at least 16 attacks, mostly in North America and Europe, often in the form of indiscriminate violence against members of the public. In the first half of 2020 alone, there have been 4 attacks. So these guys are becoming frustrated. Society treats them like shit, in point where they finally go postal. And they want to call that terrorist. So we niggers don't know our place. Now, this is the thing. Incels and terrorism. There are myriad definitions of terrorism. What draws most of them together is the use of violence against non-combatants in advance of a political goal, usually by a non-state group. Incels, as you can see, rarely commit any kinds of acts of violence, but they don't do it for a political goal or as a group. So they can't be described as terrorists, and these people are admitting it. One of the biggest hurdles, therefore, see, it's a hurdle that they have to get over, right? In including incels within the roster of terrorist organizations is the absence of a clear political goal beyond a revenge for their personal rejection by the opposite sex. Some incels discuss an imagined historical world where the women were more subservient to men and harken back to it, but there does not appear to be a concerted strategy to achieve such a goal. Of course, because they aren't terrorists. And now these people, they're struggling. That's what the hurdle is. They're struggling to find some way to label these guys as terrorists and then jail them. And what's more, but that earlier paragraph that I showed way down here about the rice cells in the is to also include guys who aren't incels in the incel label, so they can be called terrorists, even when they have legitimate grievances. Also, I just want to say that when these guys say more subservient, they really mean that the woman actually shows some kind of care or intimacy towards them. That's what they really mean. These guys are painting it as if they want women as their servants. That's bullshit. That has always been bullshit. Men in any era, in any culture, have always pandered to women, have always struggled to have women in their lives. It's a complete backhanded slap to the male sex, period. There are elements within the incel community, however, that mimic traditional terrorist modus operandi. No, that's a bold-faced lie. It's not true. Self-directed attacks, use of social media to network, and radicalize. Radicalize, look, when they talk about a moderate guy, they just mean someone who's willing to just go with the flow. So radicalize, I mean, these guys actually want to speak out. And the employment of non-sophisticated weapons are all tactics that resemble broader trends in contemporary terrorism. This is all bullshit. This is propaganda to attack men, period. All men. By posting a pre-attack manifestos or intent to start an incel rebellion. These guys might actually make manifestos, but these guys are calling it a pre-attack. There's no attack to come. Some incel attackers resemble traditional terrorists as they appear to have a wider goal, seek recognition, presence, and broader meaning to their act. These texts are for the most part confused, however, and do not appear to articulate a very coherent, broader worldview or plan, of course, because they don't have a plan and they don't have a broader worldview. These guys just feel disrespected. And you know something, what's going on here? The men are being disrespected. They are being distracted. These men who pay their bus fares did not deserve this at all. At all. They are being disrespected by their society when they are law-abiding citizens. This does demand an uprising of some kind. Men in Chennai do deserve to riot in the streets over this. Now, they try, of course, to tie this in with extreme right wing. Now, I made a video called "The Left Pushes Young Men to the Right," because the left wing has embraced and folded to feminism entirely. So what happens is young men look for something somewhere to even voice their problems. And so, of course, if they happens to be right wing, what can I say? All right. Moreover, the incel ideology converges with a broader range of ideologies, which characterize extreme right wing today. Strands of white supremacy, misogyny, and that just means nigger. Misogyny and incel just mean nigger. You guys don't know your place. Whenever someone calls you a misogynist, that's what they're calling you. Anti-government sentiments and racism are weaved into incel narratives. You see, they're trying to put the racism stamp on it, but they're talking about men in Singapore, right? So it has nothing to do with white nationalism. So this is what they're always trying to do. I mean, this is, oh my God, this is very frightening. The correlation between incel and extreme right wing throws a spanner in the works when trying to establish their relevance in Asia. Of course, I just said that. It throws a monkey wrench in, and they're saying this is a problem because we want to say these Asian men are incels and incels are terrorists, and that allows us to murder them and jail them. Well, it wouldn't be it'd be murder them or jail them. Like send a SWAT team after them. But it's worth noting that there are many incels who are also non-white, of course, because I just said it. Once technology allows a country to become first world, the women dump their guys. It has nothing to do with being white whatsoever. Whatsoever. And of course, incels are part of reaction of young men, male populations of the perceived feminization of society and a relative weakening. While admitting while admittedly a generalization, see, they're allowed to generalize men by the way of when that word that they're not allowed to use for women at all. Asian societies tend to be dominated by uncontested patriarchy. Total lie. If patriarchy was real, these young men wouldn't be suffering from singlehood, would they? They'd be saying, hey, we're men, we demand wives, give it to us. Where misogyny, there's that word for calling them nigger again, and its associated violence is not uncommon. This is bullshit again. Women have always been the most protected group in any country, any culture, in any era. The growing women's rights movement may provide some impetus that has in parts produced incels in the West. This is wrong. No, this is a bold-faced lie as well. They're trying to blame rights movement. This isn't women's right. If they're talking about feminism, it's a hate movement, for one thing. And that doesn't make women dump men. Because as you see again and again, feminism itself only rises once the country becomes first world. It's becoming a first world country that causes this to happen. All right, the policy implications. This is really important too, because we're talking about policy. The question then is whether this group of angry young men warrant the sort of rigorous counterterrorism efforts that have been poured into tackling jihadist extremism. See that? The jihadists, though, really are terrorists by comparison. They actually do, organize and get and attack people. These young men aren't guilty of anything as a group. I mean, this is what is going to happen. I don't know what to say at this point, other than if men don't get their shit together and really understanding how important this is, what's happening in their societies worldwide, and organizing to work together to fight for their rights, you're not going to have any. I'm not going to have any. What's going to happen? I might be jailed as as a terrorist, because I'm speaking out against this. They'll call me an incel because I'm unmarried and don't want to be, and say that I'm a terrorist and throw me behind bars. Because, I'm radicalizing you guys. I'm saying, wow, maybe you should think of yourselves as first-class citizens in your first-class country, first world country. That, believe it or not, that'll be labeled as radicalization. So all I get to say is you guys better get your act together. The worst is coming. Goodbye, everyone.